Well, it's a nice day. We'll have a go at turning this outside. Now this morning I met someone who really liked me Dare the Virus video, right, my film, and they said do another one, it needs to be an hour long. Well, I don't know if I can do an hour long, but anyway, we'll give it a go. But to make it a bit more interesting, I thought I'll go out and get some footage on me electric bike. Simple, eh? Yeah, very simple. To start with, I've got to put the data card in the camera, as I found out when I got there, where I want to go. So I thought, well, I'll do it again. So I recharged the battery yet again, charged it to its full, and I've been out, and guess what? The blooming battery isn't very good on my bike. So I've ended up having to pedal it and walk it most of the way home, which you'll see on the video. I'll put a little bit in for entertainment, a little bit of amusement, you know. But I mean, I haven't been far. You know, it's supposed to have a 300-mile range, and I've only been, what, a mile? If that. Anyway, you'll get a bit of footage to save sitting staring at me all the while. So here goes. Right, this time we've got two new characters, Rob and Sarah, and I'm telling this in the third person, not the first person as I did last time. So what happened is, these couple, by the way, they didn't know each other. They had not a clue who each other was, and they went on a cruise ship, you know, on a cruise, and part of this cruise was to go to a island, a sort of desert island, but it was uninhabited, and it was in a nice warm place. Don't ask me where it is, I don't know, I've not been there. Anyway, the ship took a small boat and took them to this island, part of the cruise. Nothing wrong in that. Anyway, they left them there, and they waited, and they waited, and they waited, and there was no boat come to pick them up. What on earth had happened? Well, you've heard of pirates on the open seas, even today. Or while they were on the island, blooming pirates had commandeered the ship. So they were stranded. So there you go. We've got Rob and Sarah stranded on an island with not very much. So let the tale begin. Well, at first, Rob and Sarah was on this island. Luckily, it was in a warm climate, so they didn't have a lot of shelter problems, you know. But they did have food problems, you know. They started to get hungry after half a day or a day. I mean, really hungry after a day. What do you eat? You know, how do you find out what's safe to eat? Well, they had to take a chance, and thankfully this chance worked out. There's lots of wild shrubs, and I should have done my homework, I haven't. There's programs, isn't there, that tell you how to live in the wild. You can live off berries and stuff like that, but some are poisonous and some aren't, you know. Well, they didn't know this, obviously, so they had to be careful. But what they did know, on this island, must have been blown by the wind sometime in the past, there were apple trees, and it was time for them to bear fruit, and there were pear trees. So, you know, they had something to eat. All right, not a very good diet as such, but they had something to eat. So anyway, it's one of those things, isn't it? You know, water. There wasn't any water on it, but there were coconut trees. There were palm trees, right? And they had coconuts, so they got something to drink. Later on in the tale, I'll tell you what they actually did to get more water to drink, you know. But for now, they had to live on basically coconuts. Now, I don't envy them. I don't like coconuts. But I suppose when you're faced with starvation or nothing, it's, you know, you'll eat it. So that was the first bit. Now, like I said, this is not going to be, hopefully it'll be a longish video, but it's not over a long period of time. So anyway, they were there for a week or two, you know, 2 or 3 weeks, whatever, and they were living off mainly coconuts. But then they had to take a risk, basically, because they found something that looked like carrots. But were they poisonous or were they edible? They didn't know. So having a very tentative bite on one of them, they found they actually were carrots. How they got there, no one knows. You know, some seeds must have been dropped there years ago, right? So they had something to eat. That's the thing. They had something to eat. Anyway, so they managed for, like before, the first, you know, few weeks or a month or so, and they managed to find enough food and enough water out of coconuts. Anyway, they really wanted some proper water. And one way of getting it, you can catch rainwater, which I know is bloody acidic today, but anyway, it's better than nothing. And they could catch that on leaves, because it did rain, obviously, it rained some of the time. Otherwise nothing would have grown there. And so they caught some rainwater on the leaves, and they managed like that for, as I say, the first month, 6 weeks. But this was getting a bit serious. They were both losing weight and getting malnourished and losing strength, you know. And remember, this is Rob and Sarah we're talking about, not me this time. So anyway, Sarah, by the way, unlike in my last story, she should have been called Jane. She was a plain Jane. You know what that means. I'm sorry, James. I don't mean to be offensive. But no, she was not good looking. She wasn't fat, but she was plump. There's a big difference. And also, she was a... No, I didn't say that. She wasn't the brightest. Put it like that. Being kind. She wasn't the brightest. Anyway, thankfully, Rob made up for this. Unlike in past tale, he wasn't that well equipped, but he was equipped enough to deal with most problems. So, first thing they needed was shelter, obviously, place to sleep. Well, they found not a cave, but it was, it was a tree. Don't ask me what, I don't know, I wasn't there. They found this tree with overhanging branches, a bit like a weeping willow, I suppose, something like that. And it offered some shelter. So what they did, they just got some brushwood, you know, and made a bed out there. and of course you've got reeds to tie them with. There were reeds about, you know, and they're quite strong. Or that you can get, there's, what they're called, stuff that grows up trees, you know, act like string. You can bind them with that. So they bound them with that, and they got somewhere more comfortable than the ground to sleep. Wasn't very good, but it was more comfortable. And they had a semblance of shelter. So that was the start of it. Anyway, they'd not been there long, and they got a bit of luck. Now, by the way, this is modern day, and they've both got mobile phones, but of course there's no signal. Now, Rob wasn't clever enough to know all about it, but he was clever enough to know that if he could find a satellite and beam a signal up from the mobile phone, they might get help. Well, of all things, they found an old satellite dish washed up, a parabolic. So, with great trial and error, because, I mean, you've got to be literally fractions of an inch, well, fractions of a thou even, or a millimetre, whichever you want to, you know. And so, it took, a long while. I don't know how long, obviously. I wasn't there, as I keep saying. But it did take them a long while. Several days. And they could see the satellites, right? Because this satellite passed overhead. Now, if you look up in the night sky, when it's clear, you can see a bright moving star. And that's a satellite. Now, what sort of satellite is it? Defunct one? There's thousands up there now, isn't there? You don't know. It's a pure stroke of luck or not. But if you get a telecommunications satellite, you should be able to contact it. And yeah, this sounds far-fetched, I know, but it's a far-fetched tale. You know, if you're lucky enough, you can. You beam a signal up from a mobile, you can. Now the other thing is, of course, mobile batteries won't last long. But one thing that Rob knew was how to make a simple battery. And don't ask me, I'm not Rob, I'm just telling the story, right? But there are ways to make a simple battery, enough to power a phone, to keep the battery charged up enough to use it occasionally. So, yeah, alright, I should have done my own work a bit better. I haven't, I'm sorry. You know, I'm an old man. Come on. So anyway, they managed to keep the phones powered, and they tried for several weeks, and they managed to get a signal, and using the other phone in the dish, they managed to see if it was being received and transmitted, because they could check on the other phone. They both have mobiles, but they're out of touch. Anyway, this didn't work, did it? They were just unlucky. You can't always be lucky. And they sent a SOS out, but it didn't work. So they started to despair a bit, I'll be honest. Especially Sarah. She started to despair. And Rob did all he could, but you know, it's just depression set in, and they couldn't do much about it. She couldn't do much about it. Anyway, it came to it that she had to realise, she just had to realise, that it was either live and cope with it or not. That was the choice. A stark choice, yes, but that was the choice. So anyway, that was how the first month or few weeks passed. Well, now we move forward a few weeks, and as I say, they've managed to survive. But what do they do now? Because, as I say, they're giving up hope a bit of any rescue, you know. They really are. So they start searching the island more and more, and they noticed there was a damp patch in the ground. Now, there weren't any tools there as such, but of course you can make up tools, you know. When necessary, you can actually make up tools, and that's what they did. They didn't have, as I say, there weren't any axes or anything like that, but they found some branches that broke off small branches and used them to dig with. And this took quite a while, by the way, and a lot of hard work with a lot of rests, you know, give them a break. And they eventually found that it was actually a spring, which was, of course, brilliant news. This was their saving grace, wasn't it? They found water, you know, and that's what we all need. You live without lots of things, but you can't live without water. Did you know we're 70% water? Eh? 70% of us is water. Yeah. The video on it. It's the most important thing in the universe. And we just take it for granted because it comes out of tap. But you shouldn't. It's where life came from originally. You know, it's what makes this planet different to every other planet and star, as far as we know. So, that's what you need, water. You can, you know, every 2 or 3 days, you can go 2 or 3 days without water if you can't go any longer. You can go a week without food though. You'll get malnourished, but you know, you can. But you can't go without water. So they found some water, which was obviously a big bonus. I mean, living on coconut milk and that was, wasn't doing them any good. So anyway, they settled down on there a bit, you know, and they had shelter and a bed of sorts, and they were hoping for a rescue. That's the thing, you know, they'd made contact, so they were hoping for a rescue. But there wasn't any. No one knows what happened. Maybe they wasn't heard. We don't know. So anyway, weeks passed into a couple of months, and they were both getting a bit desperate by this time, obviously. And they thought, well, what if we don't get rescued? You know, we're going to have to do something, right? They're going to have to do something. So, they set about and they found lots of small branches, lots of them, and they found a suitable tree and some vines, that's the word I'm looking for, wasn't it? To tie them together, tie these branches together, and they stripped them of some of the leaves and left the others on, and they actually formed themselves. This took quite a few days, by the way. It was quite a lot of hard work, but they formed themselves a nice little shelter, actually. You know, it had thick leaves, about 3 layers deep, so when it did rain, as I said, it rains everywhere in the world, you know, at some time or other. And it's they got a shelter, right? So they had shelter from the night and everything else. And like I say, luckily, although it got very cold at night, and as I said, they weren't they weren't a couple this time, but they knew enough and they tolerated each other enough to know that cuddling each other gives each other warmth. They knew that, and they had to do it, otherwise they'd have frozen to death, you know. So that's what you do, and of course you have to move about. So you can imagine it was not a nice time for either of them. You can imagine that, right? So anyway, Rob and Sarah carried on like this for, as I say, quite a few weeks, and it became obvious they weren't going to get rescued for some time. And so they had to start thinking, how on earth are we going to manage? How? So they had a bit of a shelter, a fairly decent shelter by this time. It was cold at night, but it was, you know, bearable in there. And but they needed some heat, so they collected some dry wood, and just like the old-fashioned huts, it was blooming smoking, nearly choked them inside, but they got some dry wood and put a hole in the roof in the middle, and at night, well, they lit a fire and then let the embers burn, which warmed it up inside enough, you know, just to stop them freezing. That was all. And it did work. It was still more hard work that they didn't really want to do, because you had to keep finding dry wood. But of course, once you had enough dry wood to start a fire, how did they start a fire? Well, like I said, it's modern day. They both had lighters. You know, it's just, you know, they might not have done. You know, look at them matches, they get damp. And if you think, oh, you can start a fire by getting a twig and a bit of string and a bow and do it that way, well, I'll tell you what, you try it. I have, in the past, many years ago, I've tried. And I'll tell you what, it's virtually impossible. It's not impossible when you see it on the films, on television programmes, but you try it. In real life, it's almost impossible to do. But of course, there are other ways of starting a fire. Now, like I said, one of them is things get washed up, right, by the sea. And we know this. We all know it. You know, go down to any coast. It's called beach combing. You know, if you've never done it, go and try it. It can be rewarding, actually. It will be interesting, but it can actually be rewarding. Anyway, after a while, they found a bottle with a big, thick bottom base to it. So being careful, because it was quite easy to be, you know, they smashed the bottle and got the base off it. Now, aiming it at the sun, as you know, as a lens, they now had a lens, it's fairly easy to start a fire. So this was a big improvement, because it meant that when they wanted a fire, they could light one in the daytime, when the sun shone. As I say, it didn't all the time, sometimes cloudy and raining, you know, but when the sun shone, they could actually start a fire. And that was a big deal, trust me. It's like when mankind first invented fire, if you like. It really is, you know, it was a big deal. So anyway, that's how life carried on for quite a while. And they roamed around and they found some more fruits, and taking a very, very tentative bite. They were lucky that it wasn't extremely poisonous, right? Because they took a small bite, and I don't know, you can sort of tell if it's edible or not. And all that happened was, once or twice they tried something and it tasted not too bad, but oh, Well, Rob tried it, and it made him violently sick. That's the worst that happened. He got a bit dehydrated, but they had some water at this point, right, because they were getting a bit fed up living off coconuts, you see. And there wouldn't be endless supply, but there was plenty, you know. There was plenty. But of course getting them was not easy. Coconuts are high up. How on earth do you get them? Well, to start with, Rob climbed up the tree and knocked a few off, but that proved very difficult. You try and climb a tree without anything. I've done it. In my past, in my youth, right? You've swarmed up a tree. I'm sure you have. But you need a lot of strength and it takes it out of you. So they went around looking and they found a fallen branch that was long enough to reach the coconuts. And that way they could knock them off and break them open. There were rocks about, obviously, and they could break them open with a rock and they could get something to eat and something to drink. But like I said, later on they dug down with sticks and they found a spring, you know, because I mean otherwise they wouldn't have lasted, they wouldn't have survived, simple as that. So they carried on for this for quite a while, quite a long while. And the weeks passed and they turned into months, and they were both getting rather fraught and arguing quite a lot. And in fact at one point Sarah threw a strop and she marched off and said, "Oh, I'm going on my own." Well, of course Rob says, "Oh well, clear off then, you know." Anyway, after 3 days she got hungry and decided to come back, decided his company was better than nothing, you know. I'd rather tolerate it. It's just life, isn't it? That's what people do. So, as I say, the weeks passed and they turned into months. And the months passed and the season was drawing to a close. I mean, it, you know, everywhere gets winter and summer, you know. Yeah, it does. Everywhere gets winter and summer. And some places, I mean, here in England, we're pretty lucky that our winters and summers are often pretty similar. You know, here we are in February, and it's like a, well, not a lovely summer's day. I'm not sunbathing, but it's certainly not unpleasant, you know. And it's the same in other parts of the world. But, you know, it wasn't extreme place, as I say. That's the thing, it wasn't extreme. Because in the winter, it would have been. If they'd been there long enough, it would have been. Anyway, they eventually thought, how on earth can we signal for help? We've got to get help somehow. And just at that point, a small light aircraft came over. And as I say, the mobile phones were dead and wouldn't work. So they thought, oh, we need a signal fire. The old-fashioned way, smoke signals. So they built a fire. Well, they all had already prepared a fire. But the trouble is, with their equipment, using the glass to get a light and one thing or another, they couldn't get it lit in time, because it was, obviously, you had to have damp stuff on it, and you could easily keep it damp by sprinkling some water on it, you know. That's pretty common sense, isn't it? But by the time they got the blooming fire going and smoking nicely, the plane had gone. Oh dear. So anyway, they carried on as before. And as I say, luckily they had water and they had some food. Although it was a very bland diet, it was enough to survive on. Not forever, but for now. And that's how they survived. And in fact, I am sure, like me, you've heard of some survival tales, right? There are some incredible survival tales, you know, where people have lasted for weeks and weeks, shipwrecked and, you know, in the ocean, things like that. Anyway, what happened was, in the end, there was another plane came over, right? This light aircraft reappeared again. Now this time they were more ready for it. Much more ready for it. And they managed to light the fire, and everyone knows the Morse for SOS. 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. And you can do it with anything. You can do it with your mobile if it works. You can do it by shouting to people. You can do it in many, many ways. But you can also do it with smoke signals. And it is, well, I think it's fairly widely recognised today. Not by the young, probably, but it certainly is by the older generation. And so what they did, they sent 3 small puffs of smoke in the air, and then 3 bigger ones, and then 3 smaller ones. And they kept doing this. While there was a passenger in the light aircraft, it was a pleasure trip of all things. And they were having this pleasure trip, and he had a camera. He was videoing on a camera. And he saw this and videoed it. So when they got back, he showed it to the pilot of the aircraft and the other ground staff and all the rest of the people, and they said, well, we better go and take a look. So that's exactly what they did. They went back and took a look. Flew around for quite a while, and of course Rob and Sarah heard this aeroplane and were stood waving on the beach where they could be seen. Right, like I said, it's an island with sea around it, so there's a beach in parts of it, and they could see them. They could see them waving, and so they managed to get an SOS out. And it took a while because they were a long way off, but when there was another ship passing, because like I said in the original thing, it was on a cruise ship route, so it was message was passed by radio to everyone, right? And this cruise ship came along and sent a boat to the island and found them and rescued them. So that's how they survived. But it's another survival tale, but like I said, it's not as extreme as my last one, but I hope it will suffice, and I hope you enjoy it.